We're back. This is ThinkTech. I'm Jay Fidell. This is, it's more than community matters. It's global connections. It's a connection in the drug trafficking area. And we're talking today with Gary Yabuta, who is the executive director of the high intensity drug trafficking area in Hawaii. And in a moment, we're going to find out what he does and how he feels and what he hopes to achieve. Gary, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you here. We had a discussion this morning. I wish you'd been there, but we're gonna talk to you anyway. And we want to find out, what you feel about these things, what you're doing about these things, and some real hard copy. I looked at the internet and I found an archived analysis of the high intensity drug trafficking area from 2007, which has to be at least somewhat outdated. I found your website, which is high-hidta.org. So can you tell us about your organization? I understand it was established in, 1999, and what it does and who it, collaborates with.
Right. The high-intensity drug trafficking area program falls under the Executive Office of the President, under the Office of National Drug Control Policy. And so our funding comes straight out of the Executive Office of the President of the United States. The funding goes to 33 HIDTA regions throughout the nation. Now, to qualify to be a HIDTA region, your area has to have a drug problem, a specific drug problem, a recognized drug problem. And back in the late 90s, we were the first state in the United States of America to have a crystal methamphetamine problem. And so U.S. Attorney Steve Alm then applied to become a HIDTA region. And he always tells me, thanks to the support of Senator Inouye, Hawaii HIDTA became a HIDTA region, specifically because we had a crystal methamphetamine epidemic. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means funding. Comes funding that I am responsible to broker to state, federal, and local law enforcement here in Hawaii to form task forces to intercept and interdict drug trafficking here in Hawaii. And so that money goes for facilities, it goes for equipment, it goes for resources, it goes for overtime for our officers that have to work beyond a 40-hour work period to get these drug dealers. And so the money has to be used appropriately and efficiently so that we can take down drug traffickers. That's what we do here. We arrest drug traffickers and we punish them by prosecuting them and putting them in jail.
Is that like DEA? What's the difference between you and DEA?
Well, we're a program. DEA is an agency, a law enforcement agency. Our job is to assist DEA and the FBI and HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, ATF, U.S. Marshal Service, Customs and Border Protection, by working together with them and having them be part of the state and local task force environment. So they, for example, you mentioned DEA, has several task forces here in Hawaii where they are teamed with Honolulu Police Department, deputy sheriffs, Maui Police Department, Kauai Police Department, Hawaii County Police Department officers. So they work collectively. And that's why we feel that it's important, because the eyes and the ears are the local police officers, the local cops. So the feds, DEA, HSI, and the FBI, they need local intelligence and local support to go after those drug dealers, because nobody knows who these drug dealers are in Hawaii better than the local cops.
Mm-hmm. Is your background in law enforcement? What credentials do you bring to this job?
Right. I have 45 years in the criminal justice system, law enforcement, and county. So I started off for the state of California, the correctional facility, California Youth Authority, worked in a maximum security prison facility. Then I joined the Maui Police Department in 1983 as an undercover narcotics officer. And I retired in 2014 as the chief of police for the Maui Police Department. And I retired to take the responsibility of the HIDA director here in Honolulu, Hawaii.
So, you mentioned that this is all based on the assumption that we have a big problem here. And by the way, I agree with that. Just on my block, not too many years ago, there was an ice factory in a residential property. And one day I came home from work and I see all these police cars around this house. And I didn't know, I had no idea. None of the neighbors had any idea. But all of a sudden, this place was shut down. What was chilling about it was right down the street.
Right.
So you could have an ice factory anywhere. And that's the remarkable thing about high-tech drugs like ice.
Yeah, that's a scary incident that you just mentioned. We believe it was a conversion lab, a lab that was converting liquid methamphetamine into crystal methamphetamine. Why was it liquid? Well, it's easier to ship without being detected in a liquid form. But everything comes from Mexico, the Mexican cartels, the violent Mexican cartels, who are literally killing each other by the thousands to compete and manufacture drugs and sneaking it across the U.S. border to the West Coast and then shipping it to Hawaii. So we really haven't had any manufacturing drug labs in the last 8 years because it's so easy to get from Mexico across the U.S. border to the West Coast and ship to Hawaii.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. It's the traffic and the trade part, the trading of illicit drugs, the importation of illicit drugs. Looking at, some of the maps I've seen on the internet, it looks like the U.S. does not really export drugs. I don't know, maybe marijuana is an exception. But it imports drugs from Mexico and Asia, and I don't know where else. And the result is that Hawaii imports those drugs too, or the components of those drugs. And so I want to ask you, how serious was the problem, at the inception of your organization, and how serious, and your work with the Maui Police Force, and how serious is the problem today? Big question is, what's the dynamic? Is it getting better, worse, the same?
Well, when I first started law enforcement in 1983, I came from California where PCP, angel dust, was a big problem in California. My greatest fear that PCP would come to Hawaii. It's an extremely volatile psychedelic drug and made people psychotic, actually, and violent. So that was my greatest fear. But when I came to Hawaii in 1983, it was cocaine. Cocaine was the greatest drug threat in Hawaii. And overnight in the 1980s, all of a sudden, crystal methamphetamine invaded Hawaii. And that became the drug of choice and the greatest drug threat. To this day, methamphetamine remains Hawaii's greatest drug threat. And we measure that because the people are dying and overdosing. Drug-related deaths are attributed to methamphetamine more than any other drug. And that's including fentanyl and opioids.
Yeah, let's take a moment and describe how that works. So if you dose or overdose in methamphetamines and ice, what happens to you? How does your personality change? How does that change affect your neighbors and friends, family, and the society in general?
It destroys your family's friends. You lose them when you succumb to drugs, especially methamphetamine. And that's because of the high addiction qualities of this particular drug. I asked addicts addicted to methamphetamine, when did you become addicted to methamphetamine? Ice. And they say it's the first time they tried it. They couldn't stop after that first time they tried it. Now, the problem with methamphetamine is that there's no medical medicinal treatment for addiction to methamphetamine, whereas opioids, you can treat it with buprenorphine or methadone. But for crystal methamphetamine, there's no medicine to treat with. So it's basically psychotherapy, treatment from counseling, rehab treatment, but nothing medically that you can do for methamphetamine addiction.
So what's the rate of recidivism? If you find me and try to help me and give me therapy, whatever it is, how likely am I to actually recover?
The last data that I recall is that within 5 years, you're going to fall on your face or recidivate back to a methamphetamine 75% of the time.
Well, this has this, just logically, this has a huge effect on any society. And if we have a lot of ice here in Hawaii, it has a huge effect on us. I mean, like getting a job, producing in a job, having a family, having kids, go to school, whatever you want, and productivity in general. So I become unproductive if I do that, if I become addicted, which is likely. And then the people around me have to spend the time taking care of me and trying to, recreate my life. And before you know it, everybody gets sucked into the well. That's got to have a huge effect on the community, on the society, on everything around the individual addict. And that in turn has got to have an effect on the state's economy. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. You become a dependent. You become a dependent if you still have a family. You become a dependent to the municipality that you live in and the state that you live in. And this is for the rest of that person's life because there's organic brain damage, the bottom line, and you don't recover from organic brain damage in the central nervous system. Imagine what else it does to your organs. So methamphetamine is like a cancer. You die one day at a time. So is there a cure for it? No. And if you prolonged use, you will damage your brain forever.
Well, what does that mean in terms of my personality? In other words, I think in this country, and I speak of all states now, we have a gun problem. And if I put an addict together with guns, is an addict more likely to use them? Is an addict more likely to be violent?
Well, I can only say this. Drugs affect your decision-making ability. And when you have a gun where the wrong action could be lethal, absolutely. Because when your decision-making is out of control, you're more apt to do a violent act as a reaction.
Hmm. So do we know who, these poor addicts and victims are? Do we have a little list somewhere? Is there a way to, have a database that can help us deal with them and help them in terms of whatever help we can give them? Or does it just happen around us where we don't know?
Yeah, law enforcement alone will not solve the drug problem. Like I said before, our job is to punish drug traffickers for selling their poison. But we know we're not going to stop drug abuse here in Hawaii or in the nation by law enforcement alone. So we partner with our public health people, our rehabilitation people, our treatment people, our educators, so we can all work together as a multidisciplinary approach to combat drug abuse. And so we work with the Hawaii Harm Reduction Center, who has data on such, and we dialogue with them directly, and we work together because I get information of an overdose in Hawaii. I can send a health and harm reduction personnel or person out there where the overdose occurred, and they can identify that area and try to administer education and treatment at that particular area, at that hot spot. But again, we have to work together. The schools, our medicine, our public health people, our emergency room doctors, we're all working together. University of Hawaii people, Department of Health, we all have to team together. And I think we're making great progress.
Well, can you talk about that? I mean, for example, in terms of an addict who is not going to recover, the progress is sadly to prosecute the dealer, find the dealer and prosecute the dealer, and put the dealer behind bars for as long as we possibly can. Is the justice system appropriately motivated and funded to do that? Is the justice system being successful in getting those dealers and arresting those dealers and putting them in prison?
You said it right. We want the dealers in jail, not the users. We want the dealers for selling their poison that are killing our people. They're murderers, in my opinion. Our prosecutors are overwhelmed. Our U.S. attorney is overwhelmed. However, I have the total respect for Prosecutor Steve Elm I've been working with him for the last 25 years. He's the reason that we have a Hawaii HIDA. Claire Connors, our U.S. attorney, is well experienced. They need more attorneys. They need more prosecutors and assistant U.S. attorneys, absolutely. But we're doing the best we can. But there's a lot of drug traffickers out there that need to go to jail. But we're doing the best we can.
Mm. So, jail, is that a state jail, a federal jail, or a combination? What jail do these guys go to? And, do they get sentences that are long enough to keep them off the streets?
Depending on what the court has jurisdiction. If they go to a federal court, they'll go to a federal prison, which I enjoy because that means when they get a 20-year prison term, they'll do 20 years. A state term, you can get paroled beforehand. That doesn't happen with the federal system. So I use the term to get more bang for the buck with the federal court systems, but the thresholds are high, and sometimes equally you need to lock up drug traffickers on a state level, and they usually go to the mainland for a long term.
How about the traders, so to speak? The ones who bring it in. Takes a whole supply chain to bring it in, and it's got to get here before it can do its damage. So from Mexico, from Asia, from anywhere that may service Hawaii, how do you catch them? How do the other agencies catch them? And can you successfully block them?
Yeah, right now sometimes we win the lottery when we intercept a package coming in from FedEx, UPS, or U.S. Postal. But that's just the very, very tip of the iceberg. Imagine what's coming in through the U.S. Postal about what Walmart has in its store every day. So the magnitude of what's coming in through the parcels is overwhelming. However, we need and we're getting front-end intelligence of what packages are targets by being identified before they even get to Hawaii, and tracking those packages when they get here and intercepting those packages with the dealer in hand. So that's our object, trying to catch them, receiving the packages, and then arresting them and putting them in jail.
Is it a prima facie case if the package is addressed to me, has my name on it, my address, and it's loaded with, ice or ice components, or you have to prove something beyond that?
Well, yeah, you have to prove that it belongs to you. And of course, the drug trafficker's defense is that I have no knowledge of this, it doesn't belong to me, but you have to have probable cause. And that's why you need that front-end intelligence, and you need tangible evidence to tie that drug trafficker with that particular package.
Sounds like a lot of it is getting in. What's the technology? What's the technique about identifying it and stopping it? Sounds to me like as time goes by, these traffickers, they have the benefit of new technology. They have the benefit of, a free society, a democratic country, which is, porous. How do you, bring new technology and techniques to bear and stop them?
You're absolutely right about the cartels. They are excellent business people, and they use technology and science to make a great product better than anybody else, 99% pure methamphetamine and fentanyl, and using their resources to get it across the border, whether it's through normal traffic or in tunnels. They are experts at this particular trade. And once it gets into their West Coast distributors, which are all part of the cartels, all they have to do, that's where it becomes very easy. All they have to do is mail it to Hawaii, Honolulu, Hawaii, Hilo, Hawaii, Kahului, Maui, Lihue, Kauai. It's that easy. Just like we get Amazon products, and they come in 7 days a week. So that's the part that once it gets to the West Coast, all they have to do is mail it.
Oh, that's so sad. We know that the cartels make uku bucks. They make billions. All of the cartels, you mentioned that they're violent, and that's, you can verify that in the press all the time. And they kill dozens, hundreds, thousands of people in aid of their competition. If they make billions, what does a dealer make? How do they recruit dealers to do this sort of stuff? To, as you said, to murder people with these drugs? Is it profitable for a dealer? How does the government deal with that, and how do the cartels deal with it?
Yeah. First of all, drugs have never been cheaper. Never been cheaper. When I was a undercover officer in 1983, a gram of cocaine went for about $125. That price has dropped to $75, $50, maybe at the most $100 per gram on today's market. And that goes for every drug, methamphetamine and cocaine and heroin. It's never been cheaper. So at the West Coast level, say, for example, they're getting an ounce of crystal methamphetamine for $500, which is, it used to be $2,000 in 1983. So $500 in LA, for example, all you have to do is ship it to Hawaii and sell it for $1,000. So that's 100% profit. And then it's broken down by other distributors and sold on the street level, maybe a 1/16 of a gram for $25. And so it's very lucrative. The money adds up. But it just by flying from LA to Honolulu, you already made $100 profit, 100% profit.
So a dealer or somebody who wants to be a dealer can make some money this way. And if that individual, is, out of luck in some way, down on his luck, doesn't have any money, this is a pretty attractive job for him. How do they find him? How do they recruit him?
It's very easy. People that don't want to work, that want to make a lot of money, that are willing to go to jail, risk going to jail because they've been in jail probably their entire lives. It doesn't matter to them. So they want to make a lot of money, and it's cheap, it's easy. They can just get on a plane that the cartels will buy them the airline ticket, come to Hawaii with a package on their person or in their luggage, and then drop it off and just take the next plane back or have a good time on vacation while you're here. So it's so easy for these people to find recruiters. I mean, that's never going to be a problem. But again, why should you have to hire people when all you have to do is mail it?
Yeah, if you're involved in drugs in Singapore, you're going to get very serious punishment, and other places in Asia for that matter. And yet, we also have importation from Asia. Can you talk about that?
I have to disagree with you there. All our drugs come from Mexico, the Mexican cartels. However, Asia is producing fentanyl. They're producing methamphetamine precursor chemicals. That chemicals are shipped to Mexico. So in that respect, you're right. They're precursor chemicals. Mexican cartels use those precursor chemicals to manufacture methamphetamine and fentanyl. But ready-made methamphetamine and fentanyl are being produced in Asia along with cocaine and heroin, but it's usually a European or an Asian market. We don't have any intelligence that is being sold here in the United States or in Hawaii. We do know that New Zealand and Australia have evidence of Asian drugs being marketed in their particular countries.
When we say Asian drugs, does that include China? Because China has a huge manufacturing capability. And I know some of the drugs, some of the non-illicit drugs, come from China. And maybe the illicit ones or the components come from China too.
Again, we firmly believe that just the precursor chemicals are coming from China. And we also believe that there's about 4,000 or more chemical plants in China. So the Chinese government cannot regulate 4,000 chemical plants. So that's how they are manufacturing these precursor chemicals. And they're just putting it on a boat and they're sending it directly to Mexico. So they're not even stopping in a U.S. port for inspection.
Mm.
Now, as far as Burma, they've been manufacturing poppy opiums for centuries, and that's still in existence. Afghanistan is producing opium poppy. So that's how the organic heroin is being produced in those particular countries, Laos and so forth, the Golden Triangle. And that type of heroin is distributed mainly in Asia and also serves the European countries.
If I wanted to undermine a given society, a given country, I'd feed them as much drugs as I could because I know that they would become unproductive and destructive. And the people, the citizens, would lose their ability to function. And it strikes me that from what you've said, you can agree or disagree that this is getting worse. It's more of a threat to us now than it was, say 5 or 10 years ago. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. I mean, in America in 2021, over 107,000 people died from drug overdoses. In Hawaii, over 300 people are dying every year from drug overdoses, primarily, again, methamphetamine. So the problem is getting worse, and it's getting easier to get because of social media. People are ordering drugs on the internet, the dark net, just like they're buying an Amazon product. They're putting drugs in a shopping cart and checking out. And so who's buying these drugs on the social media network? It's our youth, because once they get into their bedrooms with their door closed, away from their parents, they're in their own world and they can do whatever they want. They can talk to whoever they want. They can be victimized by somebody throughout the entire world. And that's what's happening. It happened here in the Big Island last year. A teenage girl lost her life by ordering drugs on the internet, thinking that it was cocaine, and it turned out to be fentanyl, and she overdosed and died. A tragic 14-year-old girl lost her life.
Tragic for the whole state with 300. I wanted to ask you about the phones. All the kids in the world and in Hawaii, they all have cell phones. And with a cell phone, you can reach the internet. And on the internet, as you say, there are options and opportunities to buy. How much effect does that have? Social media, you've mentioned, internet, you've mentioned, and the cell phone has to play a role in all of that, right?
Right. Yeah. Young adults, they don't have laptops in their hands walking around. They don't have, even an iPad. They have their cell phones. That's their device. That's their computer device right in their hands. And they're very, they grew up with that. So they're more akamai about that cell phone than you and I will ever be. And they know how to manipulate that cell phone to get whatever information that they can get on a desktop computer. So yes, that is a device. And through that, once you have that device in your hand, you can get onto the social media and you can chat and learn about drugs on these social sites. And you're dealing with a candy store. You can order whatever you want and any color that you want, actually, and it'll be delivered at your house in a matter of days.
It's a terrible picture. Of course, we have to get the dealers, but the dealers could be elsewhere, anywhere. How do we deal with that?
Well, we have to prevent drugs from being used in the first place. We got to counteract the crap that our children are being exposed to on the internet, social media. We got to tell the truth. And that's why I thank you right now for allowing me to talk, because we have to get the message out there. Messaging is everything. That's our only line of defense. Mm-hmm. We tried PSAs, public service announcements, creative commercials, but it's not working. We need the truth, and we need to keep speaking the truth for the rest of our lives, because this isn't going to go away.
So one thing that you and I were talking about before the show began was marijuana. And although the recreational marijuana bill failed this week in the state legislature, it'll be back. It'll be back because since Vietnam, or longer than that, we have dealt with a culture or a counterculture, some people say, that extols the virtues of marijuana. And, there's a lot of people out there, not only in the mainland, but right here in Hawaii, where you can grow marijuana, so easily, who like marijuana, take marijuana, and who will immediately join, the parade on recreational marijuana if they haven't already done that. Some people say that medicinal marijuana is really a cover for recreational marijuana, and I, for one, believe that in large part is true. But you said before that you oppose recreational marijuana. Why?
Absolutely, because today's marijuana isn't what they were smoking in the Vietnam era or in the 1970s. That marijuana was low potency. That was probably 5% THC, which is the main ingredient. Well, that is the ingredient in marijuana that gets you high. Today's marijuana is 40% THC, and that is mind-boggling. That is stunning. That will pretty much paralyze you, especially for the new user. Well, what does that equate to? Well, Hawaii, for example, grew the best marijuana on the planet in those early days, those illegal marijuana days. And it's because of our tropical climate, our water source, our soil. I mean, there's a reason why we grew the best sugarcane and pineapples at one time before the market fell out. And it's the reason why Monsanto grows genetic corn in Hawaii. Because of our climate and our water source and our soil, we can get an extra crop or two out of the year. It's not a perennial crop. It is a perennial crop. So the same thing applies to marijuana. If we legalize marijuana, people aren't going to be buying legal marijuana. It's just like happening in California and Colorado, those legalized states. They're buying illegal marijuana, which is just as good or better at a cheaper cost. And what will that do to Hawaii? Well, that'll ruin our indigenous forests, because you're talking about forever drugs, forever chemicals. That's pesticides, that's fertilizers that goes into the soils, destroys our soil, our indigenous forests, our plant life, and our coral, because everything goes into the ocean forever. And also they leave their PCV piping to get the irrigation. These illegal growers don't clean up after themselves. It'll ruin Hawaii. Along with, there's medical evidence that marijuana use, especially high potency marijuana, affects mental capacity at a young age. So if we have younger children smoking or using marijuana at a younger age, that's going to affect their mental capacity for the rest of their lives. About 1/3 of the IQ of users at 12 years or younger have a 1/3 lower IQ than the average person that doesn't use marijuana. So the last thing I want to say about legalized marijuana, I believe that the pendulum is swinging or stalled, where states are saying no to legalized marijuana. And I look at the November elections, where North Dakota and South Dakota, the voters said, no, we don't want legal marijuana. And they turned away from legalizing marijuana. And I commend South Dakota and North Dakota, pretty much states like us, Native Hawaiians, Native Americans. So they don't want to ruin their precious land either.
One last point on that is the gateway argument. What do you think about the gateway argument? In other words, you take marijuana, whatever potency, before you know it, you're taking other drugs because it opens channels for you. It opens a tolerance for you, a willingness to experiment. What do you think about that?
I firmly believe it's a gateway drug. You name every drug addict that I've talked to, where did you first start? They say marijuana. What's happening now, and it's what's escalating that effect, is that these kids on an island like Lanai, 4,500 people, residents on Lanai, these kids are ordering dab tools, devices, vaping devices. And what they're doing is they're smoking 99% THC products from a vaping device, a dabbing device.
Oh.
So that is just a start. And so from there, you're going to escalate to methamphetamine, which is our biggest, greatest drug threat. And it's smokable, just like dabbing is, or high potency marijuana is. So the connection's there. Absolutely.
Well, Gary, it's really been educational to have you on the program, and I hope you don't mind, but I would like to circle back later and check out what's happening, what the changes are, the dynamic is, and the threat level, if you will. But I would like to close by saying, given your commitment to this issue and your career over the past several decades, I would like to thank you for your service, Gary.
I want to thank you for allowing me to get out this message. And that's the fight for my life and for your life and for Hawaii's life.
Thank you, Gary. Aloha.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.